value chain actually is key to national development, like we said. If Nigeria must move forward, we must go beyond trucking. I think this morning I was listening to NTA, and the first thing that came on the TV was, they put a video of a picture of trucks going to supply aviation fuel to the airport. To the airport. And why do we have many trucks on the road? Because the status today, like I said, we have over 5,000 kilometers of pipelines across the nation. So if you look at, please take it to where I am. If you look at the network, over 5,200 and something kilometers of pipelines. Current guide pipeline infrastructure in development plans could require up to 2 billion investment. And I think to take care of the domestic and international needs. The last time I had a session with the Minister for Petroleum, and that was the former minister, and I asked him, during the Ukraine war, we all understand the value of pipeline system. We all know Ukraine supply, Russia supply, gas to all the European countries. And I said, why can't we take the current NIPCO pipeline that runs from Badagry to Takoradi? Why can't we take it to Europe? If it gets to Morocco, it's already in Europe. It's already in Spain. And that is a project that can revolutionize Nigeria. And Nigeria holds significant oil and gas reserves. An example of pipeline development is the AKK project that they widely talk about. So according to a World Bank report, Nigeria fled about 5318 of natural gas. This is very important, for us to conserve and use for our domestic use, and even export it. But rather we fled it just because there is no pipeline network system. Pipeline infrastructure in Nigeria, the challenges. Of course, we have a lot of challenges. I'm driving this so that you can know where we are, how the right policies and implementation can actually transform into a robust pipeline. Vandalism, theft, corrosion, sabotage, so many of them. Regulatory fragmentation and legacy frameworks that were inadequate for modern midstream. So before now, there were no proper regulations, framework that actually cater for the industry. Environmental issues, pipeline rupture, spills, flaring, land-sea crossings, market pressures, aging assets with no actually maintenance records. And you have the investment needs, estimated US 471 billion, 47.1 billion CAPEX for 39 midstream gas transition pipeline projects in Nigeria. You can see what our environment suffers. This is actually very important, gas that we can actually harness and use in our homes. Now, if you look at notable impacts of legislative framework, between when 2011, when the Petroleum Industry Act came on board, 2010, right? Came on board, a lot has happened. So, legislative framework key acts, Petroleum Industry Act, PIA 2021, primary legislation governing Nigerian petroleum industry, provide legal governance, regulatory and fiscal frameworks. Oil Pipeline Acts governs the establishment and maintenance of pipelines in Nigeria oil and gas sector. And these are some of the key notable impacts of those legislative frameworks. Community ownership, investor confidence, because when there are no laws, nobody wants to come and invest. I remember I was talking to one of the OEMs, and he said, if a new government can just come in and change the laws, so there is no sustainability even in whatever policies that we have. Infrastructure growth, host community development, and decarbonization and gas transition. So So you can see what the PIA has led to, and if well implemented, you know, most of these bottlenecks will go, and there will be confidence in our system. Investors will be confident to come and in pipeline. I'm sure the Mugini man will agree with me. You know, so for someone to come and invest here, you know, they need to be the right and appropriate regulatory frameworks. If you look at the regulatory bodies and institutional frameworks we have in Nigeria, we have the MPRO, Policy Oversight, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the NUPRO, Upstream, NMDPRO, Midstream and Downstream Regulation, and you have the NCDMB, Local Content Enforcement, and yeah, for environmental compliance. So we need the right laws to be, regulations, policies to be in place. Let's see legislative and regulatory framework, pipeline licensing and right. Under the PIA, they said any person intending to construct, operate oil and natural gas, transportation pipelines, you know, either gas or transporting pipeline license or a petroleum liquid license, you must have a license to do that. Right-of-way provision, section 127 of PIA grants licenses right to enter, use land strips for laying, operating, and maintaining pipelines, and penalties and enforcement for non-compliance, regulatory power to revoke licensing and impose sanctions. You know, so this is what I'm talking about. We need to ensure that there are penalties, and these penalties must actually be enforced. Without enforcement, we actually will not go away. That is very important to hit your house. That is very important to hit your house. And we have integrity programs, corrosion control, inspection, leaks, blah, blah, blah. These all require environmental regulation link to energy transition. In the midst of all this, let's not forget that, you know, we need to get our country on track as well on energy transition. Carbon, you know, very low in our operations. Market regulations and commercial drivers. So let's look at some of the drivers. Pipelines are vital commercial infrastructure, enabling crude transport, products, distribution, and gas supply. The oil and gas sector historically accounts for 10% of Nigeria GDP, 86% of export earnings, 40% of public revenue as of August 2021. The CapEx required for pipeline expansion and upgrading, regulatory certainty via PIA, encouraging investors' confidence. Markets, mechanization, tariffs, third party. I think that's one of the best things that the government has done, introducing tariffs. Because where there's no tariff, how do you need to fund it? You know, we need resources to fund, and, you know, private investors must come in. And what attracts them to come in is when you have the tariff framework in place. And that they are testing from July to December, then hopefully they come up with the right tariff. Market mechanism, tariffs. Domestic gas supply obligations, localization requirement, encouraging Nigerian content. Risk management and compliance framework for pipelines. Overview of risks, categories. It's a risky environment, you know, so we must acknowledge that. Compliance elements, maintaining finance conditions, integrity management programs, periodic inspections, pigging surveillance, etc., and regulatory compliance, fulfilling environmental impact assessment, community permitting, meeting gas records for regulatory audit, resilience, and the case studies. Case studies, AKK pipeline is there, the regulatory overhaul, the PIA 2021, how legal reforms can improve investment, climate, and pipeline meet downstream regulations. And case C said integration of digital integrity and surveillance. You know, so the sector must be regulated to drive. I asked a question, you know, let me, Omogini, you know, and if you put up your surveillance, put in everything, and they discover, a third-party interference, and the community say you can't go there. Will you go there? So the confidence must be there. You must take the community to be part of, as number one key stakeholder. That's the only way, your technology will work. Roadmap for Nigerian recommendations, pipeline integrity. We must invest on integrity. Prioritizing high risk, routes, remote monitoring, pigging, the CP, twin pipeline when necessary. License, the penalty as well must be enforced. Like I say, if most of the companies prefer to flare their gas and pay the penalties rather than harnessing it, so we must up our game